Well, as I said a minute ago, we are kicking off a brand new series today called Summer on the Mount. See how creative that is? This is why you pay me the big bucks, by the way. If you grew up in church, you know that Jesus' most famous teaching was called the Sermon on the Mount. And so if you haven't put this together yet, we're going to spend June and July digging into the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to use Matthew's gospel for this. And so as you see in the notes you got when you walked in, we're going to be in the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew today. And so you can follow along with us in that section. But we're going to be in the Gospel of Matthew pretty much throughout this series, examining this really great teaching from Jesus. And the angle that I want us to take on it this time is I want us to look at this through the lens of a better way to build your life. And the reason is because, so many times I grew up in Sunday school. If you grew up in church, you've looked at this material a lot. We usually look at the Sermon on the Mount and we go, oh my gosh, this is supposed to be like one of those religious experiences, and we're supposed to feel really guilty about ourselves, and we're supposed to, be, like conflicted about what we should do and how we should do it differently, and it's supposed to be so controversial and so like distinctly other. And look, let me just be honest, before we go any further, it is all of those things, okay? When you look at this material from Jesus, it was controversial when Jesus said it then. It's just as controversial when we hear it now, but so many times we get swept up in the emotion of that, and I think we miss why Jesus did this teaching in the first place. You see, I think the Sermon on the Mount is actually meant to help us figure out what our lives are supposed to look like, and then build on them. Not just like get this kind of compare and contrast moment, but like truly dig into what our lives are built on and decide. And so to open that up, I want to start with just a really simple question that maybe you've never thought of before, or maybe you have. What kind of life is actually worth wanting? What kind of life is actually worth wanting, okay? In our country, we've got all sorts of different pictures for this, I don't know why this picture's become so prevalent in America, but like all of us, I remember growing up, we wanted the house on the hill, right? The house on the hill and the white picket fence and the good job and all the things. I don't know how many 90s country fans there are in the room, but there was a band called Diamond Rio that talked about this in the 90s, and this is what his picture of a good life was. Check this out. I want a great big house on the hill, every pocket full of $100 bills, giving me a thrill I ain't never known. Is that too much to ask, right? Is that asking too much? This was his picture of the good life. And I don't know how, he got to this. It's really interesting to me that he says this phrase, house on the hill, though, because this has become a really picturesque thing for us. And you may not know this, but the phrase house on a hill was actually kind of put together by a group of Jesus followers when they were talking about what it looked like for us to found our country. Now, this is quite a distortion from what they had in mind when it was said. In fact, when this was said by an early pastor in the 1600s or 1700s, like late 1600s, very early 1700s, of what he thought America should look like, and then they called it the New England, right? What he thought it should look like. This is what his description of life should look like in the new country. This is how he said it. For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. And what he meant was people are going to be looking at us. And our lives are going to be kind of out here where others will see, almost like the fishbowl, right? And the eyes of all people are upon us. But, right, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword through the world. In other words, this whole made a story and byword through the world thing means people are going to talk about us. Like what we do matters is what he's saying, right? What we do matters, and other people are going to see it, and we should be really intentional with the choices that we make as we are founding this new country. And he looked at it as this kind of opportunity to come out and do what God would have them do. And so city on a hill, house on a hill started off as this really important thing that where people are paying attention, and we should be, really intentional with how we live our lives. And somehow, by the time Diamond Rio came around, it became a thing where we would get it because we had our pockets full of $100 bills. What a thrill, right? So I ask you the question again. What kind of life is actually worth wanting? And who gets to define what that life is? Who gets to make that choice? And the truth is, if you're chasing something, somebody defined it for you. Now, you may think you did it yourself, and I don't want to burst anybody's bubbles in here, but we are not quite as creative as we think we are. Oftentimes, the ideas that we come up with, they've been shaped by conversations and relationships and culture and things that have happened way before us for a really, really long time. And so we come up with something we feel is quite original, like Diamond Rio did, and what we realize is it's really just a distortion of something that happened before. And so I ask you again, who gets to define good life for you? What and what should that look like? Every one of us are going to have an answer to that question. Okay, and you should have an answer to this question because, look, it's the American dream. Okay, we want to have successful lives, and we want to feel comfort and hope and all those wonderful things because of this great freedom that we live into. But like, who's defining that for you? And where does that come from? I think there's a really good answer to who should be defining this for you, and I think that the answer is found actually in your gospel. And now Jesus, when he did this teaching called the Sermon on the Mount, at the very end of it, he kind of gave his punchline, mic drop moment. And we're going to cover all of this in like 7 weeks, okay? But I want to read you the punchline to the Sermon on the Mount today because I want you to know what you're getting yourself into when you really think about this. See, Jesus has a very clear vision for what he thinks life should look like. And he says, if you'll pay attention to it, something's going to happen. And if you don't pay attention to it, something else is going to happen, and the choice is yours. Here's how he puts it in Matthew chapter 7. Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock, okay? So like if you listen to what Jesus has to say in this message, this is what he's saying. If you pay attention to these words I've given, if you look into the scripture or into the story the way I've told it to you, then this is you making serious decisions to build your house on a firm foundation, to build your life on a firm foundation. So in the picture of this city on a hill and this picture given to us by Diamond Rio from the 90s, we're going to spend the next 7 days talking about what it really looks like to have a house on a hill. And I think the Sermon on the Mount is actually broken into 7 pieces. This is what it looks like. And over the next 7 weeks, we're going to dig into each what one of these pieces are and how Jesus said it and what it looks like for us to actually build a life worth wanting, a life actually worth having. All right, and the very first one we're going to talk about today is where Jesus starts right out of the gate, and it is not a fun thing to talk about, but he starts and just blasts right into the middle of our lives with desires. Okay, what we desire. Jesus says we have to redo our desires, that at the foundation of everything we are is what we want on the inside, okay? What we want shapes everything else. That's what Jesus has to say in the midst of this material we're going to talk about today. And so, again, this whole idea of want is a big deal because what you want shapes what you do. So, in that lens, let me start with another question for you. Are you actually sure you want what you want? Are you sure you want what you want, right? Are you really sure that the things you're seeking and that you're building your life on, the things you're chasing after, that's actually what you want? Because if it's not, and you haven't really paid attention to that, then now's the time to pump the brakes and go, what do I really want to do with my life? What we desire actually shapes our decision making. It shapes our relationships. It shapes the way we parent. It shapes the way we work in our jobs. It shapes the way we spend our money. It shapes the way we make decisions with the people that are in the periphery of our lives and the people that are right in the middle of our lives. It shapes the way we look at God. And so therefore our desires are actually a really big deal. And it's not an accident that Jesus starts right there in the middle of it, because distorted desires are dangerous. Right? Distorted desires will actually convince you to build a life that's not worth wanting. And having this kind of weird broken lens about the way you look at the things that are happening in your life can actually really mess you up in the long run. It'll mess up your decision making now that actually puts you on the wrong path, and you may be building your house on all the wrong stuff. You may be building your life on all the wrong stuff. So Jesus starts with what we call the Beatitudes, okay? Anybody else grow up in church and your Sunday school teacher called them the Beatitudes? Yeah, I see some nodding heads. They're the attitudes you should be. The grammar never made sense to me, and that, by the way, but that's what we say. We church people say the Beatitudes, the things we're supposed to do, the attitudes, the perceptions, the desires we're supposed to have. That's where Jesus starts. Now, before I read this, I just want to point this out one more time, okay? Because I don't want you to miss this. Jesus is going to start it anywhere, okay? This is Jesus. He's the Son of God. He has all knowledge. He knows all the things. He knows who we are. He knows our hearts. He knows everything that we need to know about us. And he begins his material, right? He begins his most famous teaching by talking about these attitudes that all of us should be living into. And they are so countercultural, okay? They are so distinctly other than anything you've ever thought about before. Why would he start here? I think, again, it's because what we desire and what we want shape everything else that's happening in our lives. So here's how it starts. I'm just going to read it through first, and we'll all feel terrible about it together when it's done. But it's Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 1. Here's how it goes. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountainside, and he sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. So this is not just the 12. This is like the larger crew of people, and then there's a crowd that's gathered around him too. So this is kind of he's sitting down. He's going to have an intentional sermon time, message time, teaching time with them. And this is how he begins. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Right out of the gate, you're like, hold on a second. These things don't sound very blessed to me. I don't know which one of y'all woke up going, really, I hope I mourn today. But he seems to think that that's an actual big deal. And he gets better. He continues like this in verse 5. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Meekness means the surrender of power. It's like you have power, but I've laid it down. It's the person who chooses not to act in any power whatsoever. For they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Now, Jesus just got done feeding a whole crowd of people not long before this, miraculously, and they've been hungering for bread, okay? And because they needed it, and they needed lunch, and God had provided this miraculous thing for them. But now he's saying that those hungers are okay, but those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, they're going to get it, and that's actually better. And he says this to people who are actually hungry when he said it, right? Well, wait a minute, Jesus, I have to eat. If I don't eat, then this body doesn't keep going. It gets better. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. In other words, there's a hinge point that if you want mercy, you're going to have to show it as well. And in this, I mean, we want to say that we're more merciful today. We're actually not. But in either culture, mercy is not a normal decision for most of us. Right? It's the opposite of that for almost all of us. And if you want mercy, then you have to act merciful first, Jesus says. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers. This is the biggest one. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you, this is the end piece of it, blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Blessed are you when you stand up for the right way of doing things, the way that you know is best, the way that I have laid out. Blessed are you when you do what I say to do, and people heap all sorts of stuff on you, all sorts of evil and all sorts of persecution and all sorts of falsely said things. Blessed are you when that happens because of me. Rejoice and be glad. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking, because I'm thinking the exact same thing. You know what would just make me really complete? A little more mourning, meekness, and persecution. Right? I got, gosh, I just wish I could have more of it. I heard a cheer. Somebody cheered. That's incredible. A little more mourning and meekness and persecution would just really make my life feel good, right? No, you're not thinking that. And in fact, every time we ever read this, like, look, if you've ever run into a Christian and they're like super excited to read this to you, something else is going on, okay? Because when we read this isn't like our first thought doesn't go to this. You know why? Because in the culture we live in the lives we have, these are not characteristics that we actually excel towards. In fact, the exact opposite, okay? If you were to ask our kind of the world we live in, what are we actually blessed in? Like, blessed are the what, right? Blessed are the what? Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit, right? Poor in spirit. Now, poor in spirit, it really just means that I know that I'm not the one that's in charge of all the things. But in our culture, we say blessed is the self-sufficient. Blessed is the one who knows that I can get it myself. I've got this. I'm in charge. I'm in charge of my own destiny. I don't need anyone else. I don't need anything else. And God said, no, blessed is the one who decides that they're not in charge of all the things, right? The next one, blessed are those that mourn, okay? Again, I'm not sitting up here going, yay, let's be sad together, especially because our culture seems to say blessed is the one that's emotionally numb. Right? Blessed are the emotionally numb. In fact, we celebrate when people can go through great adversity and not be affected by it, right? We celebrate when the phrase that comes out of our mouths all the time when people are in difficulty is like, wow, you're taking this so well, right? And we're like proud of them for taking this thing that should crush them so well. Blessed are the emotionally numb. But Jesus said, no, the people who have loved enough to actually mourn, the people who are vulnerable enough to understand that life is actually really hard sometimes, blessed are the ones who understand that there's something more than what they have. Blessed are the meek. All right, again, I said it a minute ago. This is the people who have great power, but they've decided to lay it down, to surrender it, right? That I may have great power and I may have the opportunity to do great things, but honestly, I have decided to lay that down. But that's the exact opposite of our culture, because our culture is the ones that are blessed, the morally indifferent, the ones who are like, I'm going to use my power to do whatever I can to get as much as I can as quickly as I can. And I don't know if you've ever worked for a boss like that. I have in my lifetime, not in the church, thank God, but I've worked for bosses like this that they'll just do whatever they have to do to get whatever they can as quick as they possibly can. And they'll ride you as an employee into the ground. They'll ride the company into the ground. They'll ride their integrity into the ground. Nobody wants to be around that person, right? But for some reason in our world, we actually kind of celebrate the people that did whatever they had to do to get what they have today. And Jesus said, no, blessed are the ones that are meek, that decided, okay, I have power, but I don't have to use it for me. I'm going to actually lay it down before you. Another one, right? Blessed are the merciful, Jesus says. Blessed are the merciful, the ones who actually are looking at other people through mercy eyes, through eyes that go, I get you. And we may not have come from the same place, and I may not agree with what you're doing, or I may not agree with how you're living your life, but I understand that you're a son or a daughter of God, and I want to extend mercy in your direction. No, the exact opposite of that is true in our culture, which is the vengeful, right? Like, wait a minute, you wronged me, eye for an eye. This happens a lot. Most of my teenagers aren't in the room today, so I can say this out loud, but this happens a lot with my teenagers, especially my girls. I don't know why they fight about things this way, but it seems like there's this propensity to go, well, she stole my clothes, so I took her phone, right? And like there's this escalation kind of thing, eye for an eye in our house when it comes to the girls. I don't understand. And again, honestly, this kind of happens in our culture too. Well, he did this, so I have to do this. She did this, now I have to do this. In marriages, there's so many times escalation happens in your relationships because you feel offended by something that your spouse did, and you're like, well, I have to hurt them back. Like that's the number one behavior. That's the number one kind of tendency in our cultures. Well, you hurt me, now I have to give it back to you. You said something I don't like, so now I have to get you back. You said something that's not good, so we have to cancel you. Or you did something we don't like, so now we have to cast you out, or whatever, right? The vengeance is normal. In fact, when you watch the movies and someone gets wronged, you love it when the hero gets their vengeance at the end. You love it when the villain gets their comeuppance. Those are the stories we celebrate in this world. And Jesus says the exact opposite of that. That when you have every right to be vengeful, you decide not to be. When you have every right to lash out and get yours back, you decide not to. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the ones who their motives aren't mixed, right? Who you see is who they are, and there's nothing in between. They're not looking at you as a tool. They're not looking at you as something, an opportunity. They're just looking at you as you. But in our culture today, it's the exact opposite. Blessed are the double-minded. Blessed are the double-minded, right? That I need to get mine, and I need to get mine as quick as I can. And if there's people standing in the way of that, well, then I can, use them for those nefarious gains. And look, I don't know if you've ever been caught in one of these things before where you come to the realization that someone's using you for gain, or someone's using you to gain to get to something else. It's never good, is it? It's not a really great feeling to find yourself in that place, but it's so normal. It's such a normal behavior in the world today to be double-minded, to say one thing and do another, to be one thing to somebody and then be something else and someone else to a completely different person. Blessed are the peacemakers. Ooh, this is a huge one. Blessed are the peacemakers. The peacemakers, right? The ones that seek to bring calm. There's some people in this church that I've met that this is them. And honestly, like you can't rile them, right? You just can't. And I've actually tried because we're friends and I get to do that, right? But you can't rile them. Now the opposite of that, right, is the conflict stirs. I almost put the pot stirs, right? Blessed are the pot stirs. That was a phrase they used in Trimble County, Kentucky. Y'all might not use that in Tuscaloosa. I don't know. But the people who love to stir the pot. They love to drag up drama. They love to bring up conflict and drop a grenade in the room and just watch everything burn with a box of popcorn. This is essentially what social media has become. Can we just be honest, right? I actually heard a quote from someone recently that I'm going to start stealing that said that social media has become the asylum of our country. Like it's where we say all the things we shouldn't say everywhere else. We do it publicly right there. And I think that that's gold, right? But it's this essence of like wanting to stir conflict. Because drama seems to, for some reason, be a fuel that many of us run on. And Jesus said the exact opposite. No, peacemakers, the ones who actually go into the middle of that and bring the volume down. They bring the drama down. They end up kind of trying their best to bring peace, even in situations where peace looks like it's really hard, right? Blessed are the persecuted. Blessed are the persecuted. This is probably the hardest one for us to get a grip on, right? The persecuted. Like, how could we possibly think that being persecuted is a really good thing? Because in our world today, we say blessed are the comfort, right? The comfort protectors. We want the ones that we do our best. Well, let's just, again, that we're in church, so you can't lie, right? And don't go elbowing somebody. But most of our lives are spent trying to get as much comfort as we possibly can get, right? I mean, you work hard and you excelled in your job so you can make more money and provide more things for the home you live in and the family you live with. And, we work really hard to now have robot vacuums and I'm not down. I have a robot vacuum too. I'm not down on that. All right. But like we do everything we can to make as much comfort as we can, as quick as we can. Right. And comfort has become like this normal crux, right, of how we do our life. And Jesus said, no, the ones who like decide that comfort isn't the most important thing, and they'll do what's right, regardless of whether it brings them comfort or not. Those are the ones that are blessed, not the comfort protectors, not comfort at all costs. No, it's what's right at all costs. And like, look, can we just like zoom in on this list here for a minute? Like, I mean, be honest with me, right? Because we're in church, so don't lie, right? But this is not normal. This is not normal. But isn't this better than that? Again, I hear you, all right? I promise, I get it. I am a human being in the real world just like you, okay? I've got kids to raise and a job, and like I promise you, same thing. I just have a bigger mouth than you, that's why I'm up here, all right? But like, this is better than that, right? I mean, you can see that. When we put the lists next to it, we can see it. It's so simple to go, well, yeah, I mean, golly, of course I don't want to be double-minded, and golly, I mean, vengeance does sound bad when you put it that way, right? It's easy to see when we're sitting here in this lab environment, right? But it's really hard when you're in the middle of it, in the life that we're living, because your desires, your disordered desires that exist in you, these default settings that are in all of us, they are actually driving the bus in most of our lives. And so why did Jesus start here? Well, because these are the things, like this is happening subconsciously for so many of us. And Jesus knew that if you're going to get any of the rest of the stuff I'm going to talk about, you have to get this right. You have to get to a place where you realize that there's more going on in your life that you're not paying attention to. That these disordered desires are actually carrying out decision-making process in you all the time and you're not paying attention. Now look, the churchy word for this, okay, if you didn't grow up in church, you never heard this before, but the churchy word for this, we talk about sin nature, right? That we live in a sinful, broken, messy, messed up world. That has been broken and messy and messed up ever since Adam and Eve ate the wrong apple, right? Ever since way back when, sin has been breaking things in the world we live in. And the longer we've been living in it, the more distorted our perspectives have become. This is why in our country today, we can literally hate someone because they voted in the opposite direction that we voted. We can literally cast someone out and dismiss them because of what neighborhood they grew up in or what school that they went to, because of how they chose what they decided to do with their lives. We can literally dismiss someone completely because we feel like they are against us. And it's a far cry from the city on the hill that Winthrop talked about in the early 1700s, right? That God's paying attention and we should be vigilant. It's distorted desires. It's just happened so subtly and for so long. And the beautiful thing is when Jesus said this to the original audience, okay, they had some messed up stuff too, right? It's easy to pick on the Pharisees and the law keepers of the first century, all these people that were against Jesus. And if you read the Bible that way, then again, you're not wrong at all in any way, shape, or form. But remember, Jesus is peering through the centuries. And he's sitting on a mountaintop 2,000 years ago, and he's thinking about the people that are sitting there with him. But guess what? Because Jesus is thinking about you and me. And he's thinking to himself what it's going to look like to try to be a Jesus follower in 2026 United States of America. And he still thinks this is the proper list, even if everyone around you doesn't. Now, at this point in the story, you should be asking yourself a really important question. Why? Why would I want to do this, right? I mean, I will be honest, when I began laying this series out, and I actually joked with the staff, I was like, how do I make people want this? And I'll never forget this. Emily finally looked at me and goes, you can't, okay? Like, this has to be a choice. Like, you can't make this any more attractive, and that's the point, right? Like the point at the end of the day is you have to make a choice to go, this is the life that Jesus said is best, and I'm going to choose this. So why would you choose this? That's the actual right question. If you want me to swim against the stream of everything else that's around me, why should I do this? I'm so glad you asked that question. Distorted desires make the wrong life look like it's worth chasing. Holy hunger makes the blessed life worth wanting. You actually are chasing the wrong life. It's not that you're going to just look different than people that are around you. It's not that you might potentially make different decisions about how you treat people or how you spend your money. It's not that simple. It's actually much more complex and much more profound and much more impactful than we actually make it to be. What's actually happening is you're chasing the wrong life. You're chasing the wrong life. And that's significant. That's not like I chose the wrong school, right? That's not like, man, I should have put on jeans today instead of shorts. It's a little cold. This is, I have the trajectory of the entire pathway of my life is off. The direction I've decided to go is actually not the right one. And I need to back way up. That's what Jesus says is at stake. And you can actually be chasing the wrong things. Because again, all my cards on the table, I'm a Jesus follower. I know not everybody in this room probably is yet. I pray that you will make that decision. But if you're a Jesus follower, lend me your ears for a minute, okay? If we really believe what we say we believe, there are eternal consequences to the reality in which we live our lives. And it is carried out not just in what we say, but in what we do. Later on, spoiler alert, we're going to get to a part where Jesus talks a whole lot about our intentions. All right, it's not just the action you carried out, it's what was underneath of it, which is why when Jesus starts the most important teaching of his entire life, and he wants to make sure you get this life that's worth building on, and he wants you to build the right foundation, he wants you to start from scratch in the right place. He starts with desires because distorted ones will really mess you up. Now, what does it actually look like to live this way? Well, the jury's out, right? We're still sorting out what it looks like every single day. And every single day we have a conscious choice that we can make. And every one of those situations we have the opportunity to be vengeful or be a peacemaker, to be merciful or not, to seek our comfort or to do what's right? To take our power and power up or to turn the volume down. We have choices every single day that we can carry out in each and every one of those circumstances. And it would taste a lie if I told you, even me as a pastor, that I did it right 100% of the time. But I am striving intentionally every single day to try to be better today than I was the day before. To take one more step in the direction of this life that Jesus says is blessed. Because again, right, I have decided that Jesus is who he says he is. That he is my Savior and he is my Lord. Okay, he's the guy who, he's not just my get out of hell free card. He is my King and my Lord, right? And if he says this is the life we should be seeking, and if he says if you want blessing, this is how it works, then I'm with him. And as I say every Easter, if a guy can predict his own death and resurrection and pull it off, I'm with him. And that's it. I mean, I don't need another decision-making matrix. If we really believe what we say we believe, and Jesus says this is the life, then this is what we choose to do. And I love that he talked about hungering and thirsting for righteousness as kind of the crux of the hardest parts of this, because holy hunger, right? Desiring to be closer to Jesus is what will actually drive the bus and you deciding what's worth wanting. Now, I would argue, for those of you that aren't Jesus followers yet, you're sitting in a room full of people, and it's various, and there's a lot of us that have been following for a long time. And if you could poll us, if I could get those people up here on stage, they'd probably tell a very similar story. That what they thought they wanted before they started following Jesus is so different now that they're following him. And that the things that they thought mattered don't matter half as much as it looked like they did. Now, there's a really interesting story I want to tell you to kind of close this out today about an artist from the 90s. I don't know how I got so stuck on the 90s today. I am a millennial, all right? But like I can remember riding around in the car with my mom and listening to songs by this person and not really knowing the story behind him. And so I want to tell you just a little bit of the story of a man named Rich Mullins. Okay, Rich Mullins, if you've heard his music, I guarantee it. There's several songs that are very popular. A couple of them we still sing today that he wrote. And, you know, again, when I think about somebody in the music industry, I think about someone who, they're making lots of money and they're traveling the world and they live in big houses. And again, the house on the hill, right? And Rich Mullins is the exact opposite of that. In fact, so much so that people thought he was weird. And in the, really late 70s, early 80s, and into the 90s, he wrote a lot of incredible songs that we still sing to this day. And he actually got to a place where he was offered all sorts of things, money and power and tours and, record label deals. And it actually scared him so much that he moved away from that completely and went to go live on a Native American reservation. He went to go move to the Navajo Nation reservation, and he lived there. And somebody actually asked him once, like, why would you do this? Are you worried? Did you burn out or something? He's like, no, here's his answer. This is why. He goes, Christianity is not about building an absolutely secure little niche in the world. Christianity is about learning to love like Jesus loved, and Jesus loved the poor and the brokenhearted. So I was like, why would you do this with your life? Well, because this is what Jesus did. And I realized that I was really tempted. I was really tempted to do life in a completely different way. And I have decided that the best thing I can do to follow Jesus is to love the people that Jesus loved. This was Rich's centerpiece of his life. This is how he decided to live his life. And again, I'm not saying that if you decide to follow the Beatitudes that you have to sell everything you own and move to a reservation. And I'm not saying that if you decide to follow Jesus that everything's going to be hard and difficult, because it's not. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But I will tell you the truth, okay? Again, we don't sugarcoat things here. We want you to know what you're getting into before you decide to follow Jesus. The life is worth it in ways that you cannot possibly imagine, but you are going to have to make some choices. You're going to have to. And anybody that says otherwise, they're kidding you, okay? You have to make some choices about what actually matters. What is the life that's actually worth wanting? And how are you going to build that life? Now, one of Rich's most famous songs, we're going to close out with it today. It's my favorite. Again, I can remember as kind of an 8-year-old sitting in the car with my mom, driving through backwoods, Trimble County, Kentucky, singing this song. I want to read you the lyrics because it's just really amazing. It goes like this. So if I stand, let me stand on the promise that you will pull me through. And if I can't, let me fall in the grace that first brought me to you. And if I sing, let me sing for the joy that is born in me these songs. And if I weep, let it be as a man who is longing for his home. Kind of sounds like he understood the Beatitudes. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you so much for the message that you've given us through Christ, this idea, this life that we can build, this foundation that we can set. And I know, Lord, as we examine this, that in our hearts we have to decide what really matters. We have to examine our own disordered desires. And we have to examine what it is that we think is important. And we have to lay that at the feet of the cross. And some of us, we're willing to do that right now. Some of us are willing to just kind of lay it down and sit before you and go, God, what would you have us do? But there's others that are wrestling and toiling and churning even at this very moment. God, I just pray that you would just sit before them today with all the joy and hope that you are, and let them see the life that's worth building is worth it because it leads to the hope of you. And that if we can truly get to a place where we lay our lives before you, the ups, the downs, the middles, and everything in between, and trust you fully, oh, what a freedom we will have. God, I pray that you would bless these words in their hearing and translate what I'm trying to say and what they need to hear to follow you more deeply. And I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.